So now I'm going to show you how to create a cupcake using your clay, and there's several different techniques that we're going to use. So I've already hand wedged our clay, and there's another video to explain that. When I get my class to do it, I've actually gone to the food room, or you could go to the op shop, and I've got an old muffin tray. Now if they make it straight into that, it can often stick to the surface. So I take a plastic bag and I put the plastic bag on the inside. Now what this does, enables me to do, is the clay that I'm not using, I get the students to wrap in the other end until it's ready, so it's airtight. So the clay just sits in there, and then we're going to start by making a coil of clay. So I'm going to take a piece of clay and I'm going to give it some help to get it started into a shape that's like a coil, but it's so thick. And then I'm going to start. I'm going to open my hand. And you can see I work, okay, can you just come in and listen to this? So at the moment, you need to listen. Can you hear that? So when you hear that, it's not in a coil, it's actually flat. So you can give it a little bit of help to get it going. Give it a little bit of help. So you notice I've spread my fingers out and I work from one end of the clay to the other. I can hear it again. So I'm just giving it a little bit of help to get started. There we go. Now the clay's getting a little bit long, and I know it'll get longer the more I work into it. So I'm just gonna chop some off. I can still make a coil out of that. I can hear it again. It's good my demonstration is mucking up, shows you that it doesn't work properly the first time. Okay. All right, there it's starting to come together. Now, you'll notice that I'm not actually even looking at the clay, because right now, when I work at it, I'm probably trying to listen to see if the clay is coming together. It's getting a bit too long. Help it a little bit. Okay, not perfect, but still coily enough that it'll work with the next step. Okay, so I've grabbed my muffin tray. Again, it's got its plastic bag in there. Now, you're gonna start with a little bit of a curl or a circle of your clay. Now, see how it's a little bit split? That doesn't matter. So I'm gonna twirl it together, trying to keep so that it's flush, because that's going to be the base of the clay. And then that is going to, I know it's itchy, sit in the bottom of my muffin tray. And again, I'm trying to, just gonna have a look. And again, what I'm trying to do is make sure that it fits in there. Now the clay is going to be wound around and around. So I've run out of clay. You just take another coil, have a little bit of an overlap, and keep going around and around, pushing it to the outside until you have your base of your cupcake. And when that's done, you can just pull that off. Now, if you take that out, it will fall apart. So what you're going to do is just grab a tool and you bring all those edges together, like so. Now you can use your finger as well if you want to, and that'll just smooth it out. But in the end, no one's actually going to see the inside of your cake unless you want to have it so your cupcake opens. Now, at this point, I can take it out, and you can see it's still got that coil shape. So that's actually another clay building technique as well, just making a coil built pot. Now I'm going to keep it in my hand. I'm going to use my hand as a support, And again, I'm going to go around the whole edge. And you can smooth that out. Try and make sure that you don't get any little air pockets. I've just put my thumb in there to hold the shape a little bit. Now I haven't got my perfect cupcake shape, but that's fine because I can put it back in the muffin tray and regain its shape. That's why I use the muffin trays. You don't have to. And I'm going to bring the bottom together. Now again, I've started to push that in. Doesn't matter, because once that's all together, I just put that back into the muffin tray and I can easily get that nice shape back. Okay, so you can work at that until it's done. Now, next part we're going to do is we're going to make a top for our cake. Now, if you just make a top for the cake, it'll just fall in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a piece of newspaper, tear it up, and I'm going to put that in my cake. Now I want my cake to be a little bit higher than that. And probably again a little bit higher. Now that just sits in there. What will happen is when it actually goes in the kiln for its firing, it'll burn out. It'll just go to ash. So while that's in there, I'm going to take my clay that I've got some left over, put it all together. Now remember I was saying that clay has a memory and it doesn't like its memory, and the more you handle it, the drier it becomes. So when you're trying to make it flat, I'm going to use the back part of my hand. I usually hit 3 times and then I flip it over and I hit in the direction that I want the clay to go in. So I'm sort of telling the clay I'm the boss, even though it wants to be the boss. Now all I need is enough for the clay to sit over the cupcake like so. So I'm going to take my little clay piece and then that will give me an idea. I'm going to go out a little bit because I want a little bit of overhang. It's not pretty yet, but you'll get the idea. That sits back in the clay. Any leftover clay you can be wrapping up in the plastic bag so it keeps it wet. And then I'm going to cut my clay out. And then that will sit over the top of my clay. Poke the bits and pieces in, make it look a little bit pretty. Now that's just not going to sit there like so. So the next part of this is you actually have to join the top of the cupcake and the base of the cake. There's a couple of ways you can do that. One is you can actually take the clay from here and join it and neaten it up. The other is I've got a tiny little bit of water in this container. You can make what's called slip. So you can put a little bit of clay in a little bit of water. If you give the students too much water and clay, they'll make mud pies, I kid you not. And then I'm just going to mix that up. And what that does, it's called slip, is it makes like a paste. And it helps, like exactly what paste does, it helps the clay stick together. So I'm just going to take that first one off. You stick it on there like a paste and then join them together. Now that's 2 different techniques, but the one I like the most is I'm actually going to take a little bit of clay that I had left over. I'm going to roll it out to make a tiny little coil. We've already shown how to do that. And then this acts like a binder for the clay as well. So that's where I've been working. I'm going to stick that in there like so. And then I'm going to take the clay from the coil, match it to the bottom, and then I'm going to match it to the top and work my way around. Now I find that's the strongest technique. I get the kids to photograph their work before it goes in the kiln, because if they haven't joined it properly and they haven't made if they've made air pockets, their clay will explode. And I get a couple of pieces explode, but you know what? That's the process of it. So you'd work all the way around. You don't need me to watch me do that. Then I would grab a skewer, which I had before, which I can't find. Oh, the skewer. And then I'm going to poke a hole in the bottom of the clay. If you put that cake in the clay like so, without a hole in it, it would blow up because it's got an air pocket in there. So it's really important to make sure there are no air pockets or your clay. Now you can work your way around. This is one that I've actually done before, and you can see that I've actually gone back and made little like patty cake paper lines in there. I did that with a skewer, but a fork is also a really good thing that you can make those sort of lines for your decoration. Now, once you've made your cupcake, you can then add your decoration on there. So for example, if I was going to make a leaf, don't just hit it down on the surface. I've got the lino on the table so it doesn't stick. I'm going to grab a knife and I'm going to shape a very pretty leaf. Not really, it's the point of the exercise to show you how to do it. Now, another technique to putting your clay on as well is you can scour one side and then you put marks on the other side to make a texture, and then that will sit on as well. That helps it. Now, again, it won't just stay there on its own. So you take your tools or your fingers and you help the clay adhere to each other. Now I know it's looking beautiful, but you get the idea. And then you can put some decorations on that if you wish. Now you wait for that to dry out. You've got to make sure all the moisture is in. You can put it in a kiln and it will come out like so. There's a little air pocket underneath in which the newspaper can come out like ash. So that's how you make a clay cupcake. The other thing you'll notice about your clay is it starts to dry out on your hands. I always make the students wear an apron and I put a couple of buckets of water outside on the grass. So all our tools, all our hands get washed in the buckets outside because if the clay gets washed down the sinks, it can clog up the sinks, which I've been caught for. Where I am very fortunate that I have a kiln. This is my electric kiln, and you can see how I've stacked my shelves so that I pretty much don't have to move them around very often. I can get most of the activities that I do with my classes in there without all of that. Now, if you don't have clay, stoneware clay or terracotta clay or earthenware clay or whatever type of clay, or you don't have a kiln, there's actually what's called now air dry clay that you can use, and you don't need to fire it. It's pretty good. I've used it a few times. I find that it's not as tough as putting your clay in the kiln, but the kids still get to have a go at doing hand making techniques, so it's still good to have a go at.